Well, hello. We're going live again, episode 2 of the DIY Disclosure podcast. Today, I'm really excited to be talking with my friend Steve Bassett. He was the very first lobbyist for UFO/UAP disclosure. His organization is called the Paradigm Research Group. He's been a part of this history of what he has coined the term for. He coined the term for the history that he participated in, which is pretty neat. And that part of the history, in his words, is the truth embargo, the greatest cover-up in all of history. Let me try to bring him in here now. I'm going to invite him. Click the button here. Copy that. Hopefully we'll get that to our friend right now. A little email going here. Here you go, Steve. And new email. Oops. Steve and Bassett. Join the link, exclamation mark. And there it is. Hopefully he'll get that and join us in just a moment. Cool. Let me text him too. Looks like we're live on X now. So everybody jump in. Yeah, you made it here. God sauce. Yeah, I just took a shower, so my hair is a little free form right now. It doesn't help to have this headphone situation. So we'll workshop that a little bit. Reasonable. Not a great look, but reasonable. Okay, any second now we'll have our episode 2 compadre joining us. Prepare your questions, anyone who is joining in. Please keep your comments. Maybe you can mark the questions somehow, like question : and that way I can that way you can banter freely in the comment section, and I will be able to find the question somewhat efficiently. Let me text our friend Steven, make sure he got the email, the link. Hi, emailed you link. Hopefully he sees that. But yeah, I've had the pleasure of getting to know Stephen Bassett in person in Washington, D.C., where he's been, working in the Capitol for many decades. And I've also had the pleasure of being one of the founding members of his organization called the Hollywood Disclosure Alliance, which has been very cool. Oh, looks like he's popping in. Let's add him to the stage. Hello, Stephen. Can you hear me?
Okay? Yeah, I can hear you. Just kind of get over here, get a little settings action. Got 720. I'll
volume up here.
Do I want to mirror this camera?
You hear me?
Sure. Whoops. See if that. Do I like that?
Don't hear you yet.
No, I don't.
Volume up. Back. Oh, no, I do. Okay, that was me. That was the volume issue. Hello, can you hear me? Okay.
Yeah, I can hear you fine. How about me?
You sound perfect.
I do. Let me just double check. I'll make sure I got the right mic setting. No, that. Oh, wait a minute. Audio. Got the good mic. Excellent. This is my standard setup, my friend.
Yeah, you're back in your command center. How was your trip to the West Coast?
It was good. It was productive. I made a huge mistake on the way back, something you don't want to ever do. I missed my red eye, the last flight of the day with the airline, and I was with a bag this time. It is the worst thing you can do. You first of all, you pay $99 for a rebook. Okay, fine. It was my fault. But you can't go through security because you can't check your bag, right? Because the flight you got is the next morning. And so you can't go security, can't check your bag. You got to stay out there in that area in front of the check-in, which they have stripped down to nothing because the homeless are going in there and sleeping. And so you've got just a few chairs with armrests. Dozens of people are lying on the linoleum floor. It's cold. And I had to stay there for 8 hours.
Oh man! Well, you're an invincible. I don't know how you do it. You keep going.
So other than that, the trip was fine. I just had a bad exit.
Yeah, that happened to me. I was traveling in during one of these tropical storms, and I was redirected to somewhere in the south, and I was stuck all night at the airport. So I've been there. I'm glad you bounced back. Okay, though.
Sad eye.
Yeah, and in terms of the documentary stuff, I'll tell you there's been some good progress since I last spoke with you in terms of the potential funding aspect as well as the pitching aspect in terms of telling the true stories that we're going to be describing here to some extent. So anyway, we'll talk maybe after about that. But good productivity.
Let's make sure we collaborate on that. Let me try to get my input in rather early than late.
Oh, yes. You're the first to know, except for everyone else who's also watching. Yeah.
Well, I'm suddenly getting an image problem here. I don't know what the problem is. Now I'm back. Droid cam's a little twitchy. Let's hope it holds up.
Okay. Well, you look good from my end. So yeah, well, it was one of the best times of my life, hanging out with you at Contact in the Desert, where you did like a million different lectures and workshops. I don't know how you do it. I was worn out just doing a few things, and I'm, just a little bit younger than you. So, so you recovered from that, and you went back to LA already, for your various projects. And I was mentioning, I introduced you before you jumped in, how you're the first lobbyist for UFO/UAP disclosure. Of course, you've lived and been part of the whole history of it. You've coined the term truth embargo, which is one of my favorite terms, which I think is just at the essence of what we're going through right now as a civilization, just lacking a couple key ingredients of what's really going on in terms of the nature of reality. So yeah, let's give people an introduction to you and who you are, who you started off being, and how you became, among other things, the first lobbyist for disclosure.
Let's make this short. I decided this is what I wanted to do. I wanted to get involved in the UAP issue. I'd always been interested, never got involved. But around 1995, I was itching to really make a change, and I thought about this issue. I went to a conference, I read several books, but I read John Mack's book on abduction, and it was a breakthrough. A Pulitzer Prize winning professor, or head of psychology at Cambridge Hospital, Harvard University Hospital rather, and a genius. And he was engaging the issue and trying to do hard level articles, and published articles, scientific journals. And he did the RUA investigation. I said, this issue is here now. It's here. It's about to happen, and I want to be on that train. And so I decided this is it. I didn't know what I'd do. I had no idea. I had no idea what I was going to do, except this was the issue. And so I volunteered for John Mack's group. They graciously let me come out. I spent about 4 months. It was a wonderful introduction to the issue. Met many contactees. And while I was up there is when I figured out my place. My family I have family in DC Metro going all the way back to 1922. I've been in and out of this place forever. Lived here, worked here. I knew my way around, and I had a place to stay. So I said, I'm going to go down there and engage the politics of the issue, because it's not a science matter anymore. It hasn't been a science matter hell since Blue Book, if not sooner. The reason that it's not out there and taught in every university is the government embargoed it and essentially denied it the existence of the issue itself. And that was a political decision. Therefore, you need a political solution. You can prove things all day long. You could stack evidence to the sky. It wouldn't matter. And so I said, I'm going to engage in politics. Well, what would I do? And it hit me. It was like a flash. I was in the office in Cambridge, and it hit me like a flash. I'll bet nobody's ever registered as a lobbyist on this issue. A lobbyist on the extraterrestrial phenomena and the sequestering of technology and so forth. An ET issue. Any ET lobbyist. Never happened. Why would they do it? You're not going to make any money. Your wife is going to divorce you, right? You're going to be ridiculed. People won't invite you to Thanksgiving dinner. I mean, nobody's done this. But I wasn't sure, so I hurried down there. And I set up Paradigm Research Group immediately as a sole proprietorship, so I didn't have to do any filing, simple filing. And then I registered as a lobbyist right away. And I had a hunch that the Washington Post checks every lobbying registration, because there's potential news. Any lobbying registration would be a big news article. And when they saw mine, they're going to go, well, this is interesting. We should go talk to this guy, right? If I just registered as a lobbyist, I don't know, for the canning industry or something, they're not going to call me. But they showed up, took a few months, got a long interview, a big photo in the paper, and I need to start promoting that interview and photo. It's what launched my career. And that was in the front page of the business section in the Washington Post, when the Washington Post was a big deal, right? People bought thick paper, big, sections and stuff. And it was a big deal. And there I was in the business front page, which is the second most important page in the Washington Post. That's all I needed. That was my credentials. And with that as leverage, I started approaching media, eventually gave lectures, and became a full-fledged activist, not just a lobbyist. Lobbying is just a portion of what I do. And I don't do that much, because it's still not easy to get in front of people on the Hill. but I have lobbied the hell out of the media. I don't think anybody has engaged the media on this issue more than I have in the entire last 77 years. That's not like saying that some people have not had greater success engaging the media, but in terms of the totality of engagement, that was my thing. Didn't need a lot of money to do it, and I wasn't going to have much money. And so I've been a political activist, a disclosure advocate now for 28 years.
Yeah, you've been in it longer than anyone, and you've can you describe some of the changes you've seen over the decades you've been doing this?
Well, first, more has happened in the last 7 years since 2017 than in the previous 70. So that's the most important thing your listeners or viewers need to know. The history of the issue is rich and complicated. And it could have been over in the first week, literally. I mean, we could have avoided 77 years of frustration. As almost everybody knows that's into the issue, there was a press release put out by Walter Haut with the approval of Blanchard, the Army Air Force Base head guy, that they'd found a craft. They'd found one of those things that had been reported, like Kenneth Arnold's. They found a craft, and they alluded to that's what it was. They didn't find a plane. They didn't find a helicopter. They found one of those craft. And fortunately for the government, I believe, and Don Schmidt will correct me if I'm wrong, but at the point that they put the press release out, the second crash site with bodies had not been found. Otherwise, they might have put out a press release that we found crash and it had bodies in it, right? And they don't look like your brother-in-law. And so consequently, that would have been it. There's no way that they could have turned that around, but they didn't know about the bodies. So put out the craft, and that word went straight to I think Ramey in Dallas Fort Worth, and then it went straight up to the DOD and to the president. There's no way the president was not informed about this immediately. Some people think no, he was informed. We don't have the record of it, but why would there be? And so a decision could have been made. Truman could have said, "Look, we've already put the press release out. Let's go. Let's do it. Looks like it could be interesting. We're the most powerful nation in the world. People are going to believe us, whatever." Or he could have said, "Look, let's take a week to assess this," and then announced it after they had more information. In which case, there would have been no truth embargo, and disclosure from the president would have happened in July of 1947. He went a different way, and it's taken 77 years to do what he could have done in a week. And so that's your first week of it. And over the decades, there has been a fluctuating degree of involvement by the government, engagement or statements from the government, highly fluctuating media engagement, a consistent growth in the number of people aware of the phenomena, the number of people that believe it's real, the number of people that believe it's real and it's non-human. That has been relatively consistent and growing. God knows how many hundreds of millions of people around the world now believe this phenomenon is extraterrestrial. It could be half the world's population based upon certain polls. So that's kind of in a nutshell the last 77 years.
Okay, so it started off, it was a split decision. The president and whoever else was making the decisions decided to go a certain way. Do you think there were previous retrieved vehicles before this that the United States had access to, or was this this event in 47, with Kenneth Arnold,
Sure.
et cetera, the inciting incident, was it perhaps the first retrieved vehicle? Like, what were some of the factors going into this decision to go this way and start the truth embargo?
There has been very little evidence for an earlier vehicle. However, there is some evidence. There have been some statements from people that can't fully be dismissed. I will not be surprised if the government did have or knew where one or more vehicles was prior to 47. There's this talk about a vehicle in 33 that was in the Italian hands for a while. I wouldn't be surprised. But whatever the case, it was extremely tightly held, right? And you can imagine that, right? Because the war comes and it's absolutely going to be tabled. Plus, earlier they would have had even less understanding of it. There is the suspicion that the Germans got one, which would have been highly inciting to them, and why they might have been trying to do certain kinds of research. I don't think they achieved a craft, but it's great sci-fi and it's great, talking point.
Yeah.
But
well, it doesn't seem like they were able to. It doesn't seem like they're at least able to weaponize it for war in that time frame.
Again, right? I don't even think they flew one. I just don't. But if that is true, then you have this pre-47 history, which hopefully has not been shredded or tossed in a burn barrel. And we're going to learn about that, which will just make it all that much more interesting. But until you have concrete evidence, I'm going to assume the U.S. government didn't know squat. Oh, well, the U.S. government had sightings. They knew something was going on. But they didn't have conclusive proof it was non-human tech until 47.
So in 1933, there was the disc crash in Italy. And according to rumors, anyway, I haven't seen any evidence of course, but that there was some kind of collusion between the Vatican and the U.S. And supposedly that disc was retrieved to the United States. And that was potentially our first, thing to reverse engineer.
Possibly. I think the statement I heard is if it was retrieved after the war, which means it might have actually not been in our hands until after Roswell. Don't know. Again, there's so many holes, so much missing history here. It's frustrating, but that's the government's fault. It's not ours. The government has gone to great lengths to make sure we know as little as possible. And yet we know a tremendous amount because a lot of people devoted their lives to this. And they didn't make any money doing it, right? They didn't make much. And it wasn't an easy ride. And they're my heroes, of course. The ones that cowardly turned their back on it, particularly the scientists that knew better. I'm not fond of them.
Well, you stuck with it your whole life, man. So you're my hero, buddy.
28 years. Not to make it 28 years. Prior to that, I was just screwing around.
Okay. Well, you've been in the game longer than me, at least, and I respect that. Yeah. Very cool. Okay, I started making, in preparation for some documentary stuff, not to be specified, I've been, working on some timeline of truth embargo related history. So another data point on the way to where we left off is 1938, War of the Worlds, Orson Welles, famous broadcast. Do you think that was a coincidence that he put on that production, or do you have any thoughts that it might be related to the sort of messaging intended for the...
No. Orson Welles wrote a book. I mean, not Orson Welles, but
H.G. Wells. Yeah.
Yeah. H.G. Wells wrote a book. Orson Welles, which is interesting. Maybe it was his, second cousin or something. It was a great book, great story, and the idea of extraterrestrials was in play. I mean, you had some of these little short films that were turning up in front of movies. I forget when Flash Gordon started. Just it was out there, but the idea of an alien was in the science fiction, but not robust at all. I assure you, nothing like what came. And so now, however, it was generously used by the government and disinfo agents to make the case to any responsible person that, oh my God, look what happened on Halloween in 38. Everybody went crazy. That's not true. Some people did act bad. And so that's what will happen. The world will go nuts if you tell them there's extraterrestrials here. And the analogy was to a broadcast that was completely fake that made people think there actually was an invasion, right? So yeah, not really appropriate. But the government threw everything at this they could. They threw anything at it they thought would stick to try to keep this issue contained and embargoed. And that was their policy. And it's no sense in fretting over it. It is what it was. And we're going to end it. We're going to end that embargo.
That is your mission, and I'm very excited about this happening. Okay, so just going through a couple of dates, then we had the I'll skip this one, but in 1942 there was the battle for L.A. For Los Angeles. What do you make of this event? Do you think it was authentic, and has it contributed to where we left off in 1947 with the Roswell stuff?
Again, as we move into the era of the UAP modern era after 47. And the researchers start getting involved. They're looking for everything and anything that might be a connection. And if they jumped on it, right? And that's fine. anything that was like, yeah, and they're investigating. But some of the things that they focused on just really inconclusive. So the 42 thing was interesting. Everybody, I mean, most people that are really interested in the subject have seen the photo. It's intriguing. There's some stories about what have happened later, but I don't know. It might have been just panic, and that object may just be the collection of many lights coming together in some cloud. Who knows? So we have no way of knowing whether that much influenced the government policy or not. But I can assure you, if it was an ET craft, apparently they didn't shoot it down, and two, it didn't shoot back. So its impact on the government policy is unknown, and I don't invest much time in it.
Got it. Skipping that one. Very cool. It was an interesting Spielberg movie, though, made about that.
Oh, yeah, sure. Well, not one of his best. He hit on that movie, let me tell you.
It was the first one that didn't make much money.
I liked it, but I love that kind of stuff, so no big deal.
Yeah, it was interesting. Spielberg, the most influential voice in this topic, at least getting these well-researched narratives out there. Okay, so we left off with the Kenneth Arnold UFO sighting, and that's when everything really gets, changed, where this policy of the truth embargo is implemented. Can you educate us your understanding of how this decision might have been made, and what the various agencies and resources that went into enforcing it over time?
Unfortunately, the government has no desire to tell us any of that. We've had to piece it together. It's like, it's as if the government history handed over a huge box to us, in the years after 47, or even going forward. But it was a huge box. It was one of those giant puzzles, not a tabletop, but one that would cover the entire kitchen floor, right? One of those. And it's missing 70% of all the pieces. And our job since then has been to somehow figure out what the damn image is. But 70% of the pieces aren't even in the box. Just putting it together would be brutal. And so we have only mostly conjecture about any particular episode. And so we have bits and pieces about what was happening post 47. There's some evidence for a group being put together called MJ12, Magic 12, which I happen to think is probably the case. They had to, they were going to put a group together, and the group that was listed in documents that were released from the government, not formally released, but released to one of the researchers, all of them were appropriate. So they probably put a group together, and they started classifying the hell out of everything. 1947 is the same year that they passed the National Security Act, which converted the OSS to the CIA, created the NSA. All kinds of classification schemes were put together. I think they were going to do that regardless, but it was quite convenient for them in terms of really battening down the hatches on the good ship truth embargo. And so we don't, and I'm sure they probably in the early days committed themselves to not using paper. In other words, the fewer documents, the better. Let's just meet in the dining room here, and we'll talk about this, talk about that. I mean, they were faced with a very challenging situation, and they needed time to organize a highly contained, highly classified setup. Keep as few people involved as possible, but they had to have a high-level group of people to assess the situation. I mean, what Truman, he didn't have a background in science, I don't think. And so that happened, but everything was being done sub rosa. So we don't have the history. We just got bits and pieces. And so it's easy to say, okay, this happened, that happened. But mostly I just kind of tell people, well, we know a little of this and we know a little of that. But the real story is not going to come out. And hopefully they've kept the history. There is some sort of a historical record, memoirs, unpublished memoirs, whatever, that will tell the story of what happened after 47. It's one of the most important pieces of history, all of history, right? Unfortunately, well, in ancient times, you had a lot of history happen that we don't know about because, hey, it was ancient times. No records, no whatever. And so there's most of history we don't understand. But now we have the ability to really chronicle history. The Civil War is a wonderful example. The Civil War happened at a time when there was a lot of media and a lot of ability to chronicle that war. And so we have an extraordinary amount of knowledge about the Civil War. And of course, when you get to mid 20th century, we have the ability to record everything pretty much. And then, of course, it becomes ridiculous. So in terms of history, in terms of 1,000 years from now, we would like people 1,000 years from now to be able to come back and study what happened between 1947 and 2017 in great detail, because I think it's the most important 7 decades in the history of the human race.
I agree. Yeah. It gets more and more interesting the longer we live, our limited lifespan, that so much is happening during it. So, okay, 1947 being the pivotal year, there was the public USAF UFO studies with Project Sign, of course. And you discussed all the National Security Act around the same time. And then, fast forward to the creation of Project Blue Book. Will you give us a bit of history of how that all came together and what it was?
Well, the government had a problem in that they had to classify this, they had to embargo it, but they had a problem because they couldn't hide it. The phenomena was going to go and do what it wanted. The ETs are going to go anywhere they wanted. So they had a real problem. How do we somehow prevent the public from getting really interested in this or caring about it or investing too much resource and time into trying to figure it out? They had a terrible problem. And so very smart people, and these were very smart people that they beat the Axis powers. They won World War II. They're pretty smart people. So they figured, okay, look, one, we can't simply keep saying there's nothing there, because people know there's something there. And so they have to acknowledge, well, there's something there, and we'll try to find it out. We're going to study it. Promise you. And so by doing that, it kind of holds people off, right? Well, we're studying it. We'll get back to you in 100 years. So they had to study. At the same time, they're also undermining the effort of civilians to study it. So you had two things going on. You had what seemed to be the front programs, essentially legitimate, to try to figure it out. And then you had another program that was not public, designed to minimize the ability to figure it out. And to suppress interest by the academics, by the media, any way they could without going too far. And so these things started pretty much in parallel. Right after 52, things got rolling. So you had the very early two efforts to sort of do a little research. Some of it was, I think, for the government's sake, didn't want to be public. Project Sign, I don't think it was intended to be public, but eventually we learned about it. But Project Sign concluded that was really something going on there. And they said, well, that's the wrong answer. So they burned all of them and started over with Project Grudge, perfectly named, right? Project Grudge. But it came up, there's nothing to this. But that wasn't working because eventually the public is now diving in. And what certainly ensured that was 52 and the flyover of Washington, D.C., which really scared the public. And a lot of people saw it. NICAP comes together very soon. And now things are really a problem. So they had to go further. They had to create a very sophisticated research effort. They had to show the flag. And that was Project Blue Book. And the deal with Project Blue Book, it had to be big. It had to be, seem thorough. It had to seem legitimate, but it couldn't prove anything. Right? And that was the situation that the good Dr. J. Allen Hynek was brought into. One of the most extraordinary situations any scientist ever has been brought in, had to confront.
Yeah. And I'll be talking to our mutual friend, the son of this astronomer, sure. Paul Hynek, a great man of his own right. So yeah, I'll be talking to him next week. So I'm glad we're getting this history.
And so Blue Book goes on for 17 years. And what happens is it stalls and stalls and stalls, but the phenomena keeps being seen and heard. Private researchers jumping in, organizations being formed. And so there's a whole public effort that is clearly working towards confirming or proving a lot about this, while the Blue Book effort was not supposed to do that. And so at some point they realized, oh God, the more the public investigates it, the more difficult, the longer Blue Book goes, this is going to become an impossible situation. And so they had to end it, right? In other words, they had to get out of the investigation business and at least get out of that. What they were going to do after that, I don't think they knew. And so they did something pretty despicable. They convinced probably a fine person, Dr. Edward Condon, who was professor at the University of Colorado, to sign off on a completely bogus report, complete lie. and then they would use his credentials and the credentials of the University of Colorado, which needs to apologize for this one day. I really encourage the university to apologize for this.
Yeah, this is public. Yeah, get out ahead of this.
We've all figured this out, right? So, like, I understand you've got a good football team, but that's not enough. You need to apologize. Anyway, so they put this out, and then they said, oh, well, there's nothing here. And they shut down Blue Book, but they still had a problem because NICAP was strong. 5,000 members, a lot of scientists, a lot of government people, even CIA people on the board. It was strong. It was happening, right? McDonald was a science advisor. Keogh was a full-fledged political activist, really, and they were making progress, so they had to destroy it. So they blew it up, dropped a 500-pound bomb right on the organization and blew it sky high. And pretty despicable thing they did. But, on the list of despicable things the U.S. government has done, it's not very high. There's a lot worse stuff at the top of that list. And so that got them a break. They were able to get a breather. A lot of people bought it. The media bought it. And the Blue Book, they have to worry about that anymore. And they got from 1969 to 1978, they got about 9 years of relatively not a whole lot happening, not too much pressure. And then I think Bill Moore, but definitely Stanton Friedman, found out where Jesse Marcel Sr. lived. And they got in touch with him. And that little hiatus was over. And very quickly, Roswell became the centerpiece, the driver of the disclosure process, the disclosure car. Had a rear-mounted engine. It was the Roswell events, which is now the most studied event of the phenomena ever, and proven beyond any reasonable doubt. And so from 79 on, they had a pretty rough ride. I'm sorry, 78 on.
And
by the way, Blue Book formed in 69 to take the place of NICAP. Wasn't as strong, but it was still a national organization, and it contributed to the citizen efforts.
And do you have any information or theories as to why this seems to have started or accelerated, at least in 47? Was it related to the war, the nukes, things of that nature? What do you think is the meaning of the increased perceived phenomena activity?
Well, until the ET start returning my emails, I have a strong personal conclusion, which cannot be proven yet, but it is very strong. I mean, I've had 28 years to distill this thing, and that is that the range of engagement, the amount of engagement, the phenomena's activity exploded globally in 1946-47. And it was directly tied to the dropping of the bombs in Japan. That is really the beginning of the modern UAP effort. If we had not ended the war that way, if we had not used those bombs, or if he'd even not even dropped them on people, maybe done a little offshore spectacular, presentation, and if a nuclear arms race had not developed, again, highly unlikely, humans going to do what humans do, the ETs might have remained pretty much dormant. They might have stayed back, but we didn't. We built it, and they watched that. Of course, they've been watching. I'm sure they've been aware of our technological development since 1900, and probably understood the technological trend curves that were underway. There were dozens. They're actually pretty smart. I understand the ETs, and so they're watching all this. And then we build this bomb, and then we test this bomb, and then we drop this bomb. Not really military targets. Not really. It was pure revenge for Pearl Harbor and any other nasty things the Japanese did. We killed a couple 100,000, mostly women and children and non-combatant men. And the ET saw that. They knew that the way the human race rolls, going all the way back to the beginning of civilization, whether that was after the flood or catastrophe, or whether there was some civilization prior to that, probably same deal. Very primitive man and hunter-gatherers, no. But once we got together in cities and stuff, we've been on a particular, we've been behaving a particular way. And that is, we constantly seek to find ways to make more powerful weapons, and we use those weapons in order to conquer other people and lands and stuff. We've been doing it over and over and over and over again for at least 12,000 years without a break. And we weren't going to stop. And we finally built the ultimate weapon. The ultimate weapon, well, at least as far as our physics goes, would be an antimatter weapon, which we are doing research on, believe it or not. I can confirm that. It's not talked about. I mean, it's absolutely not talked about. Hell, you can hear stuff about our bioweapon stuff, but they don't talk about the antimatter, because any nation that would do that would have to be totally insane. And nobody wants to be thought of as insane. But the ETs figure they know what's going on. And so at that point, they made a decision based upon their needs and our risks to engage us on a very much broader global way, in very complicated ways, which has essentially served an agenda of theirs, and all that was very much about a need I think they have, but also an agenda about a concern they have for us, and possibly a mutual agenda. I mean, a double agenda involving something that is a problem for them, but also involves us. And that is the only way I can explain why all of a sudden we go from a few Foo Fighters flying around to ETs all over the place. And everything else that's happened since. I mean, this is not simply based upon those early days. In other words, this is about nukes, and the timing is about nukes. And ultimately, when we conclude this, it's going to be about nukes, and the other stuff will be secondary, incidental, not incidental, more like a sidecar to a motorcycle. And when the press and the academics figure that out, they might start being a little bit more effective. And if the politicians haven't figured it out, and I hope a couple have, they might get much more serious about getting this done. But I have been putting this message out for 20 some years, and I'll just keep putting it out to every podcast that comes. If CNN actually calls me, I'll say the same thing on CNN. They don't call. MSNBC, ABC, CBS, none of them, they don't call. Hell, Joe Rogan called. I'd say it on his show.
Joe Rogan.
This is what it's about. It is about the nukes.
So the nukes, right? That's the most plausible inciting incident, right? So what would be, if we're capable of understanding motivations of non-human beings, right? Why? Okay, so in terms of what happened with Roswell, right? Was that something that was, like, you think, gifted to us, or an actual crash, or something that was shot down? Like, why? How does that potentially relate to us having nuked a couple, cities in Japan?
No, remember, Roswell happens after Japan. Japan's in 45. Right. Yeah. And Roswell happens. And our nuclear program is well underway. And we've learned by 47, the Soviets were going to have their nuclear program and their own missile program. And so the military guys figured out what was going to happen. We're going to have another war. It'll be World War III. It'll be nuclear. And it'll be really bad. And so they had a carte blanche to spend all the money they possibly could to develop all the weapons they possibly could to defend the West or the democracies against the evil Soviet Empire. I get it. All right. But all we know about Roswell, it was a crash. We got the bodies. We took the bodies to the hospital. They stunk up the whole hospital, and they got shipped off to somewhere. There's several possible locations where they ended up. Same thing with the vehicles. And the ETs never came back and got them. They could have, I think, but they didn't. That's all we know. Beyond that, we're just speculating.
So the bodies are pretty confirmed, because I've heard different versions of the story. Some describe it more like a gift, like an empty vessel that was sort of just was gently lowered to the ground as opposed to the crash.
I don't know who told you that story, but don't return their emails.
Fair enough. I'll tell you privately. But okay, so it was a crash. Why? Do you have any theories or information as to why it might have crashed?
There's two basic theories. One is a massive thunderstorm over Roswell in New Mexico. Roswell. There was one at the time. There was a huge one around that time. I've actually been in a thunderstorm in Roswell, New Mexico. It happened, and this is really something. It happened on the 50th anniversary in 1997, and I attended Roswell that year, and there was a very, I think it was Whitley Strieber gave the keynote at the end, and he held the whole keynote with some entertainment in the hangar. Oh God, I should know that. 5444, I forget that number. I should know that number. And fine, we went out there, and a thunderstorm came in, and I lived in Florida for many years, so I know about thunderstorms. Never been anything like this. It was unbelievable. The lightning, and it was right on top of us. The lightning was obviously hitting not too far, and the blast was then rattling the entire hangar. The rain was so intense you could not hear Whitley, even though they had microphones and amplifiers. It sounded like, the worst hail you've ever been in. And then the water started flooding the hangar. I mean, it was the most intense storm I've ever been in. So that was a taste. That's the kind of storm that was over Roswell, I believe, in 1947. It's possible that it caused a vehicle to crash. It's possible it caused two vehicles to crash into each other. That's another area that's still hanging out there. The other theory is that we had a new radar system that we were employing, something that could interfere with their navigation. I'm not big on that. We have a tendency to overestimate our powers. Not really big on that at all, but that's a possibility. You can't rule it out. There's the only two theories I have. I will say this, and I've said it countless times, that the vehicle was not a saucer. The classic saucers are pretty hot, or the Tic Tac, but it was a crescent-shaped vehicle. That's what Kenneth Arnold saw. The press called it a saucer, but it wasn't a saucer. It was a crescent, and if you look, a crescent is not a full circle, and it's somewhat aerodynamic. And so, this might have actually been a craft that had some aerodynamic aspect. On the other hand, it could still fly really fast. And so, I've always speculated that the occupants of those vehicles were not at the level of sophistication of the principles that we're dealing with. They were just kind of hanging around about that time, along maybe with some others, and they weren't as sophisticated, and thus they were more vulnerable to a crash. And it's notable that the description of the beings in that craft did not fit the description. There may be an exception or two, but overall, they don't fit the description of the ETs that have become commonly reported by contactees. And so I just have a feeling that group was kind of around, and because they were not sophisticated enough, because the game was about to begin, things were about to get very serious, we got a vehicle, got their bodies, and then any of their friends left. They left town, right? They were not qualified. They did not have a ticket to the party that was about to begin. I've always had that feeling, but there's no way to prove that. But it is noted that the description of the vehicle, it wasn't a saucer, it was a crescent-shaped vehicle.
Yeah, I made a note of that. Thanks a lot. Okay, so working our way through the history, what would you say is the most consequential next milestone? We have in 1949 the death of James Forrestal, for example. Do you have any thoughts on that incident?
It's not that consequential. It's just a piece of the history that needs to be sorted out. But it wasn't consequential to the overall picture, other than if he in fact was deeply upset about the policy that the government was pursuing. If he'd gone public, it would have been very interesting. But
yeah, well, I guess if it was,
it's not trivial. I mean, it's something that should be reported and talked about. But I think you're referring to, I think, more impacting events.
For sure. I mean, I guess we don't know exactly what happened. If it was, conjecturally speaking, proven that he was murdered as part of the truth embargo, that could be an escalation, but we don't know. I guess for sure. Yeah. So I'm
sure he has family that would like to know.
Well, we shall keep looking into it and see what we can find out. But and then another date, 1952, the Washington D.C. UFO incident. Was that potentially an escalation? What do you make of that?
Almost certainly an escalation. My interpretation is that they knew we had a crash vehicle. They're flying around, they're being reported, and they were probably assuming, as part of their agenda, that the government would have to acknowledge that they're here, which would then lead to something else. But we weren't doing that. We went the other direction. And so anybody that was observing this, watching this, would clearly see the government was not going to come forward on this. And so the flyby over the Capitol was kind of a message like, get on with it. Get going here, right? We have a plan, right? And it involves you doing something and you're not doing it. And so it was like a little tap on the shoulder, like, hey, get with it. And it definitely created a substantial response, but it wasn't response I think the ETs wanted. It triggered the formal beginning of the truth embargo with the Robertson report, and the real formal beginning of the truth embargo, where the government got really serious about, we're going to lie like a rug on this for as long as we want to, maybe forever, because you can't handle the truth. And so the ETs obviously saw that, and then I don't know, then they had to decide what their plan was going to be.
Yeah, it seems like a good way to catch our attention with all those craft over the Capitol.
Oh, they got our attention. You don't just fly. There's a lot of cities in the United States. They get flown over Philadelphia for 7 or 8 days. Wouldn't have been quite as impacting, or Omaha, whatever. Now they flew over the Capitol of the United States, and like that was like that. Just they was out for a cruise and just happened to fly over a few times, and no. And that's common sense. Sometimes you just use common sense to try to understand something. You don't have to have 47 footnoted research papers. Sometimes common sense is pretty straightforward. We'll do the job.
Right. Well, speaking of common sense, is it your understanding and or guesstimation that those craft, both from Roswell as well from the 1952 incident at the Capitol, that those are extraterrestrial beings, or could they potentially be a breakaway civilization located on Earth primarily, or does it not matter one way or another?
Or hand puppets being manipulated by some super puppeteer. Look, common sense. Sometimes that's what you got. You got to go to the common sense. We're smart. We have technology. We figured out how to drive cars and fly airplanes, and we figured out how to go to the moon. Right? And so, obviously, if there's other civilizations out there, they're going to figure out how to drive cars, fly airplanes, and go to their moons. But if they've been around an extra couple of thousands or 100,000 years, they might just know a little bit more about physics than we do. We went from the horse and buggy to quantum mechanics and relativity theory in about 8 years. Okay, 9 years, 10 years. So obviously, if any civilization could figure a solution to the relativity barrier of star-to-star travel, they were going to travel star to star. And so those that think that we know everything about time and space and the universe are obviously foolish. And so the conclusion, the common sense explanation is that they are able to travel star for star. Now, they may set up bases and hang around for long periods of time. They may even set up bases on a planet. They could set up on a moon, whatever. They could set up a substantial contingency in a particular solar system of interest and study it and not go home for ever they wanted to. But star to star. Now, it's also the case they say they're from star to star. They're from other stars. They tell the contactees from time to time this. There are many earlier civilizations that have powerful lore referring to sky beings. Obviously, you watch Ancient Aliens, you learn all about that. Ancient Aliens is going to prove to be a lot more credible and correct than most of the critics would suspect. And the lore, they tell them these sky beings tell them they're from other stars. And so I'm putting my money on star to star. I mean, look, hey, it's no problem. There are people that buy lottery tickets every day, 190 million to 1. And some fool actually will win the 190 million bucks. But most people will never win, even come close. And so all I'm saying is, if you're going to bet, you put your money on star to star. And it's a non-trivial thing, because star to star extraterrestrials, whether or not they have bases here, which they do, is a lot less, frankly, frightening and disturbing than interdimensional beings or time-traveling beings or beings that have been living here for all these thousands or hundreds of thousands of years, but just very good at, they're very shy. They don't really, they don't never go out. They just stay home and, peruse the internet. All of those are very disturbing in my view. Star to star is like, yeah, of course. Yeah. And so I don't spend much time or get much. I don't want to push those other ideas, because I think they're counterproductive to the activism. Hey, they're a possibility. People think about it, but some people get really overwrought about it. I mean, they're absolutely certain they're time travelers. That's absolutely certain they're time travelers. Can't be any other way.
Yeah. And
I'm going, fine, but I got other things to do. So sorry.
Yeah.
I'm going to go with star to star for 400, Alex.
Yeah. Well, it definitely is what we've conventionally considered. It makes the most sense in terms of objective reality, that they were from elsewhere and then they come here sometimes. I agree. It's a little potentially more disturbing to think that they could be around us at all times, paranormal style, just sort of lurking in every closet and corner. It could be all the above. Whatever it is, I'm just, want to figure it out. It does seem to make sense that there would be the potential for other life to be out there and for it to eventually get here if it felt like it.
But I understand some of the I understand why people go to these things. I mean, there are aspects of it that kind of point in that direction. But here's a simple example of how things can get kind of confusing. The ETs, well, we got one group that looks just like us, at least one. They have various names. The Nordics is the general name, because obviously they're not Nordic. I mean, I don't think they're from the Nordic countries, but they look just like us and they look like Nordics. And you've got the Greys, they're all bipeds. So it's speculation that these are humans from the future. In other words, we evolved to be some of these beings, all right? And that they're coming back in time. Now, I get that. I have a much more logical explanation for this. How is it that there's any beings here that have any qualities that are human? Or, just being 2 eyes, 2 legs, right? 2 arms, that might have a connection to the human race. Not by time traveling, but this way. It's very simple. If ETs can go star to star, then they have been going star to star for a long time. Not thousands of years, millions of years, right? You want to go billions of years, okay, but probably they come and go. And so at any time in the past, 40,000 years ago, 100, 150, 200,000 years ago, extraterrestrials could come to this planet and take as many humans as they want off planet. Sorry, you have been drafted into the ET Human Advanced Genetic Program. You're coming with us. And since there was no television, no Wi-Fi, no newspapers, no nothing, they were not missed. They were just gone. And it's possible that thousands and thousands of humans have been taken earlier times off this planet, and they have evolved and been and manipulated, perhaps genetically. It's possible that some of the proto-humans were taken. You could go now back several million years. We've had many Homo species that have gone they've gone extinct. They were competing for what we became. So they could have taken them going back 1 million years and completely evolved in a different setting with genetic manipulation or whatever. And so that could explain any sense that these beings have a connection to us, which I think they do, without invoking time travel. But that's common sense, and it's not good sci-fi, or it's not as good sci-fi, and it doesn't get as much attention.
Yeah.
But I tend to stay as close to Occam's razor as I can. Otherwise, I'd be even crazier than I already am.
Yeah, you have to, you're in DC, you're trying to interface with normal people who wear suits, so you have to rein it in a little bit for the cause. I got you. It's all pretty
you don't
weird.
want to be going up in the hill and sitting down with some legislative aide and say, look, I need to tell you about the time traveling ETs. They're really us from the future, and we need to get a hearing on this, and then a couple of the big aides give you an armpit taxi out the front door. So no, you can't do that.
But it does seem like that the government, their primary concern with the truth embargo, perhaps, is to keep the technological side private for defense purposes. Would you say that's the primary issue as to why this topic, the UAP phenomena and such, is 2 levels higher in secrecy than even the Manhattan Project was?
Well, we don't know exactly whether it's higher or lower. This is assumed, but what's more important is this: there are multiple reasons for the truth embargo, and let's say they're all important. I don't know what's primary and what isn't, but there are a number of reasons for the truth embargo. One of them is the concern. Well, the desire to weaponize the tech, and also great concern that other countries may have vehicles and may be weaponizing similar tech. And so you've got a competitive thing there, just like the nuclear arms race. You got a potentially ET weaponizations race, ET tech weaponization race. So that's going to classify it. There are concerns that might disrupt society, be upsetting, and that's a legitimate concern. So that's another. Well, those are really the 2 big ones. I mean, after that, it's kind of small. If the technology and its implication is huge, and the concern, particularly as you go back in time, the concern for social disruption is legitimate. So if you're Harry Truman, I mean, you're looking at this and going, "My God, this is going to be very upsetting." We just got out of a war. We're trying to get our economy back. And there's a potential for a new war. And that's the third reason, actually. The third reason is not just an ET tech weaponization race, but the fact that early on they realized that we were going to be in some sort of nuclear arms race. And the next war would be nuclear. The war after that would be sticks and stones. And so for their point of view, any major disturbance of the force, any huge paradigm shift, could create unpredictable circumstances that might increase the risk of a nuclear war, or even trigger a nuclear war. And so better safe than sorry. And so you take all of those together, and overall, within the military intelligence community, obviously the vast majority of managers were happy to support the truth embargo.
Well, I have some questions from the community trickling in. You may know Science Bob McGuire.
Bob, how you doing, Science Bob?
Yeah. So, Steve, he addressed it to you. You are my favorite eternal optimist. You're also my favorite. What is your number 1 reason for optimism now?
Oh God, there's more than one. There's dozens. By the way, I wonder. I want to know who his favorite eternal pessimist is. But oh no, there are so many reasons where we are now. Everything changed in 2017. We essentially, I guess, crossed the Rubicon, frankly, in that year, and we crested the hill, and it's been pretty much downhill. So I'm not saying it's a steep hill, but it's downhill, right? Since 7 years, and if it weren't for extraordinary developments in the United States and geopolitics, we would have had disclosure by now. But every activist movement is subject to the whims of history. And when you're trying to get governments to do something they would prefer not to do, it's particularly subject to the vicissitudes of history and all the stuff that happens. And it slows it down. Sometimes events will speed things up, but usually it's not. It's the other way. It's usually always something makes it harder. And so it stretched out what could have been a very quick outcome. We're now in our 7th year, but more has happened in the last 7 years than the previous 70, easily. And we are so close to disclosure that I can think of any. Well, we're very close to disclosure. It wouldn't take much at all to do it. And the ground has been laid, the structure has been set up, but not all of the necessary infrastructure has been placed, but almost all. And so we're there. The decision is in the hands of people we actually know who they are and what the decision is. We actually even know that they would like to do it, but things have complicated. Things have gotten complicated by both domestic and foreign events.
Okay, cool. We're going to work our way to the present tense. And 2017 is the second pivotal year, right?
But wait a minute. I just realized I didn't fully answer Bob's question. The single most important thing that's happened in the last 7 years is probably the fact that we finally got the first legislation on the issue, not just one bill, but 4, and that is the single most important thing. The implications of that, and the implications of the fact that Congress has finally gotten involved, and they've stayed out of this for so long, is the most important thing that's happened.
Yes, that was a historic occasion. Let me go back. Okay, I want to do one more question from the community, and then we'll maybe get back to the linear sort of breakdown of the truth embargo years. Okay, here's one. This is from my friend Godsauce. You might have met in one of our previous spaces. Given what we know now about Nazi tech, why did Project Paperclip, which recruited von Braun and started NASA, why did this seem to set back our technical progress? I think I know the answer. Were the Nazis sabotaging our advancement, or did they secretly hijack the real tech something leave via a breakaway?
We don't have information on that. That is all heavily classified. What we do know, we brought a lot of Nazi scientists over here. And we know that some of them got involved in the space program and went to the moon. So I'm sure there's some information along these lines, but I've never seen anything about how the Nazis we brought over, sabotaged us. I would think that all of them would have been utterly thrilled to be over here, and they got out and whatever. And not stupid enough to ruin a good thing. That doesn't mean that some of them behaved badly, but no, we had a massive technological surge after World War II, which might have been somewhat helped by some ET tech, but not as much as I think has been put forward. But nevertheless, massive increase, and the fact that huge number, because the Russians, the Soviets got plenty of Nazi scientists. A huge number of Nazi scientists were allowed to survive and allowed to do their work, because they're smart. Let us not forget, the Germans are incredibly smart and disciplined and organized, and so they contributed greatly to the technological advancements post World War II. Which obviously, if we just killed them all, we wouldn't have gotten that. And so some people are not happy about Project Paperclip. But we would still, even if we had put them all in jail and never allowed them to even see a computer, we probably still would have had an arms race. We would have probably still had a Cold War. But those scientists helped get us there a little sooner, but we were still going to do it. So I don't have a problem there. But the full story of that Paperclip, I assure you, is hopefully it will come out down the line after disclosure, assuming they haven't burned all the records.
To what extent do you think the truth embargo has put our scientific progress behind schedule, at least in terms of what regular people have access to?
I don't know about behind schedule, but
I mean, I guess if there was no truth embargo, would we be like the Jets, more like the Jetsons now? What are we missing?
Well, I don't know about, here's what we do know. We do know that there was about 4 billion people on the planet, roughly, when the war ended. And now there's 8 billion. That's a lot of people. That's a lot of scientists. That's a lot of geniuses. And so by classifying and making everything secret and putting in a limited number of the hands of highly classified, super secret people working underground or whatever, they shut out the vast majority of intellectual power that could have been brought to bear. Now, admittedly, it only takes one scientist to have a breakthrough. I get that. But we're dealing with something quite extraordinary. And so, there's no question that if they had if Truman had ended the truth embargo and this tech had been responsibly handled and the science responsibly engaged, there's no telling where we would be now. However, it's also the case that if the collective intellectual power of the human race was brought to bear in this, the weaponization might have happened even sooner. It might have been more likely to become a ET weapons race. There's no way to know. We won't know. But you could make that case. And so I try not to be too hardcore on this. But at some point, right? At some point, as we approached 8 billion people and the needs of the human race became overwhelming, we pretty much established that you can't have a nuclear war because of mutual assured destruction. This tech should have been brought out, developed for peaceful means. Whatever weaponization they were doing, we need to get the peaceful uses. And so, again, the history will not be kind in that area, right? There's a reason 8 billion people are on this planet. I'm sorry, there is a reason that a major portion of the 8 billion people on this planet do not have enough food, clothing, shelter, or toilets, and are really unhappy in most cases and suffering. And they're not going to take it lying down. And it's creating all kinds of problems for us. There is a reason for that. One, the lack of the technological developments to be able to service those people. And four, the untold, possibly hundreds of trillions of dollars, inflation adjusted, that has been spent on the entire nuclear arms, war, destruction, rebuild that's been going on since 1945. Just 20% of that could have probably given everybody food, clothing, shelter, and toilets. But no, it was spent on that. And so we needed tech advancement in this area. Let's just say that the idea of a world ruled by very wealthy people, beholden to massive military complexes, unless it got its population under control, really good quality birth control, good stuff, it's really cheap, really free, always works, and you kept the population down. So instead of 8 billion people right now, we had just 4. And it might not be so bad. But no. We were determined to have lots and lots of people, definitely not do what we needed to do to take care of lots and lots of people. And history will basically say, Jesus Christ, what were you thinking? Right? I mean, you were a developed society. You weren't like 2,000 years old. I mean, you weren't the Huns crossing the Alps to destroy Rome. You're a highly sophisticated, educated civilization. How could you be that stupid? You couldn't do the math. You couldn't understand what it would mean if you went this way as opposed to that way. And they'll go, well, and they'll say, well, and for that reason, history will not be particularly, how would you say, disposed to being sympathetic to the awful things that we're about to do to ourselves. They're going to say you deserved it.
So I've been enjoying the Grant Cameron book with you as one of the main characters in it. If we're not fast forwarding too quickly through history, is this a good point of departure on our journey to the present tense? Is this
we're not going to be able to cover all the history, so we just hit what you're interested in.
Okay, I'm interested in the whole thing, as you know.
It's a long history, my friend.
Yeah. Okay, let's get into the Clinton era, right?
Sure.
Which seems to be another inflection point in terms of information coming out. There's, I guess, one of the Rockefellers who was behind the effort to investigate this topic and to get more information shared with the public and to have. So yeah, tell me about the Bill Clinton taking office and your involvement and all that.
Well, the Rockefeller Initiative is an important story. I think I actually coined that phrase. I think I did, but I'm more than prepared for somebody to say, no, you didn't. But the engagement of Rockefeller and the Clinton administration after the Cold War ended was it was a very significant event that had far-reaching consequences. When the Cold War was over, a lot of people who knew there was an extraterrestrial presence and knew there was a truth embargo, so it didn't have that name yet, felt it was time to get on with this, right? Let's get the information out. A lot of people felt that way, but not many of them could do something about it. But Rockefeller could. Lawrence Rockefeller was a billionaire, friend of the Clintons. He was a Democrat. Though he said he would have approached George Bush if George Bush had won his second term. So he approaches them, the administration, with, let's get this out. Let's get the truth out, essentially. I think initially it was couched pretty basic, like let's just release all the UFO files, but it very quickly became more defined. But ultimately, he was asking President Clinton to do what it took to end this truth embargo. Not necessarily in 6 months or 6 weeks, but rather start the process and let's end this truth embargo. The Cold War is over. The Soviet Union has collapsed. The Communist Party was outlawed. They'd gone capitalist and they brought the church back. I mean, we won, right? Now let's turn this victory into some sweet, sweet success. That's not what we did, of course, but humans do what humans do. So the importance of it is that it drew into the initiative people that were going to be players in the political arena for decades. And I'm referring to President Clinton, Secretary Clinton, and John Podesta. And there were some others too that knew about it. But these three individuals were obviously going to be players for the rest of their lives. And so and then the other thing was that the initiative failed, but not because there weren't any UFO files. It failed because the government basically just told the president to go to hell, right? It's like, and not only that, I mean, they lied to him. They lied. They were contemptible. They spent millions of dollars on a phony report from the Air Force under Sheila Widnall called Roswell Case Closed. Total lie. Millions of dollars was spent. And so that was notable. It's even more notable that we know about it. And that's Grant Cameron. He filed the FOIA. Several people did file FOIAs, but he got the bonanza. He got 1,000 pages that showed it all. And so that we know about it. And from that point on, the Clintons were going to be connected to this, whether they wanted to or not. And I believe they had intent. They had plans. I am quite certain that Senator Clinton intended to run for president absolutely no later than the day her husband left office, and probably thought that she would follow Al Gore, because Al Gore probably, I think they felt good that Al Gore was going to win that election. So I think for some times, for years and years and years, the Clintons and John Podesta have had many communications and so forth and discussions, probably not much in print, about their connection to this issue and how they would engage it in the future. Bill Clinton had to stand back. Well, Bill Clinton and Hillary Clinton had to stand back. She wanted to be president. I'm sure she did not want to engage this issue, but the issue kept evolving. It kept getting stronger after that election. And so while they didn't engage it, they really stood back. Almost nothing after Clinton leaves office, after President Clinton leaves office, nothing from them. However, their top advisor, the key person of their team, John Podesta, went to some lengths to keep them connected to the issue through him. And so over the ensuing years, John Podesta got involved in this and that and everything else and continued to get further connected to the UAP issue. But the Clintons did not. And then finally, well, she ran for president. I started a process to try to get the media onto her. In other words, I was trying to get the media to engage her because of the Rockefeller Initiative. I didn't have the connections or the range I had later, but still, I was doing it. I was based in Washington. But before I could get any traction, she essentially lost her position. She lost her status to candidacy to Obama. And so, boom, Obama did not have a connection to this issue or a significant connection to the Clintons for that matter. And they also pissed him off. And so that severed it right there. And now I knew she was going to have to wait 8 more years. And then the question was, would they continue to maintain a connection to the issue? No, they stayed out of it because I think she saw it as not a help to her winning the White House. However, John Podesta continued to stay in the issue. And then 8 years go by. Well, 6 years go by and she starts to run again. But by this time, I had my ducks together. Ducks together? I had my...
They were together in a row, probably. Yeah.
I had my ducks lined up. And I had my act together, right?
Yeah.
And so I initiated a pretty robust effort to ensure that there was no way she was going to win the White House without having the ET thing all over her. And that's why when I get given the chance, I was able to get the money to produce the citizen hearing on disclosure, put it together with 6.
And what year was that again?
April, May 2013. And so we had a mock congressional hearing at the press club, 1 block from the White House. 42 witnesses from 10 countries testified to 6 former members of Congress exactly as they would if they were in a hearing. And it was all filmed. And that was step 1. And we also live streamed it to anybody on the Hill that wanted to go watch it, or any journalist that wanted to watch it. But we're just a little timid about coming down in person and watching it. And so then the next step was to create 535 plus DVD sets of the whole thing, 30 hours, and send them to every member of Congress, which I did that in November, December of 2014. It took a while to get that done. And as soon as those sets were delivered, I then launched a media campaign to get the media to engage the Clintons, Hillary Clinton, Secretary Clinton, on the ET issue, because we was able to provide them all the information about the connection, right? I mean, there's plenty out there. I'm just sending it out relentlessly. I had a very, very powerful publicist working for me, way below quote too. And we ultimately, from about January of 2015 through the election itself, generated 400 articles referring to a connection between the Clintons and the ET issue. 400. And they are all on my website and can be found under resources under 2016 election initiative. And so many media were approaching them that they had to address it. They had no choice, but they wanted to be careful. And so they were turning up on talk shows. President Clinton was, Hillary Clinton was, Obama was. Podesta even gave a couple of interviews addressing the issue. So there were, I think, 11 formal, voice engagements and or interviews on camera, and 10 or 11, and then 400 articles. I mean, so by the time the election is approaching, I have completely connected her to this issue. The media has done the job. And so the stage was set. Now, I was absolutely certain that she was going to disclose the ET presence. She was going to do whatever it took and get retribution for her husband and herself and show up the DOD. You told us to go away. Well, we're back and you're going to disclose this. So that's one of the reasons why I think that they didn't really stonewall. They could have totally stonewalled this or made very counter statements, meaning ETs. What are you talking about? There's no ETs here. So I know that she wanted to disclose. And I'm not the only one that felt that way. And so she lost. But again, you can see the connection all the way back from her campaign, 2015-16, all the way back to the Rockefeller Initiative. And so one day, they will finally acknowledge this. They will, I'm absolutely certain, they will give unless something happens to them, they will give an interview and tell us all about it. Everything that happened and their efforts.
Yeah.
And and deserve whatever credits they deserve for what they did do. And get retribution and get essentially confirmation. But they're not ready to do that yet.
Did you interact with Lawrence Rockefeller at all?
Did I have any interaction with him?
Mm-hmm.
No, I never got to meet him, but I know people that did. I had many colleagues that were involved. Couple have passed. I did have a proposal on to him. It was on his desk when he died about funding PRG, but he died. And I got a letter from his attorney saying, "We're sorry, but we're not going to be able to help with your program because Lawrence has passed."
So he was like a black sheep of the family. They're the only one interested in this type of research.
Well, the black sheep is probably conjecture. I do know this. I did meet his. I gave him a posthumous award at one of the X conferences that I held back in the aughts, and I eventually was able to deliver it personally to his daughter in Marin County, a little coastal city there where she lived. She's passed now. And I had lunch with her and I gave her the award. And I asked her, I said, "Did you support Lawrence's efforts in the UFO area?" She said, I did. But she said the rest of the family did not. Now, whether that means they thought him as a black sheep or whether it just irritated him, I don't know. Lawrence was the good Rockefeller. I mean, I don't know if there are any bad Rockefellers, but I know that Lawrence was a good Rockefeller and maybe the good Rockefeller. And he gets a bad rap. He was a great man. And a lot of what he did is not known because it was kept secret. But there are plenty of people that know some of the work that he did. And I think eventually somebody's going to write a bio about him that completely covers all of the efforts he did in the UAP area, as well as consciousness and elsewhere.
Yeah, he was very ahead of his time with all the consciousness work and looking into taking the phenomena seriously and all that. Well, yeah, so 2013 was a big and very successful year for you, I guess, propelling us forward to the craziness of 2017. Is there anything you want to hit on before we talk about this impactful year?
My theory, and again, we don't have a firsthand accounting because the individuals are not prepared to do that, and that's fine. We have bits and pieces of information, but we do not have an origin story. But it is my theory, and I've been saying this for some time, and no one has contradicted me, right? I mean, if they thought I had it wrong, they could come out and contradict me. But I believe that there were plenty of people inside the military complex like me that knew about the Clinton story. And they knew that Hillary Clinton was going to run for president. They knew that she was probably going to disclose. And they also, in a growing number of people within the military intelligence complex had come to the personal view that, yeah, this truth embargo should end. And so something came together in a complex process that's not fully understood that prompted 10 people to come forward as part of an organization that was set up specifically so they could come forward. Right? And I believe, have high confidence that the plan was very straightforward. It was to get this thing together. And once Hillary wins the election, Senator Clinton wins the election, they would announce this project, this organization, and put their bios up and so forth, and immediately begin engaging the issue in support of President-elect Clinton's efforts. And of course, the media would then be even greater. I mean, the media would have gone nuts. And she would have been perfectly set up to become the president, call for some hearings, ask for some hearings in Congress, get some witnesses together, whatever. Or she could have just walked out of the East Room and done it and just said, "Look, I know quite a bit about this, and there's an ET presence. My husband was stonewalled on this, but you're going to learn about this real soon." That would have been the force majeure, home, going for a grand slam politically. But so that's why I think it was all brought together. And then when she lost, the whole plan was thrown up in the air. It was a mess, and it was even worse because, as we learned just before the election, that the leader of the CEO of this group, Tom DeLonge, had already approached Podesta about this. He didn't approach the Republicans. He approached Podesta about this, which is one of the reasons why I'm pretty sure that was the plan. And they were getting him involved and drawing him in and interviewing people. Why would they do that unless they planned to do something rather dramatic the moment she won the election? And we would have never known about that, except Julian Assange made the mistake of hacking 50,000 emails off of Podesta's server. That wasn't a mistake. That was more WikiLeaks journalism. But he made a really big mistake when he went beyond journalism and tried to screw Hillary Clinton's election up. Because if he had followed the normal WikiLeaks protocol, I think they would have simply dumped all 50,000 files out, maybe with some redactions, maybe not, handing them over to some media and let the media do what it wants. But instead, he deliberately put them out in 5,000 tranches of 5,000 each over a period of about 12 days or 13 days. Every other day, there'd be another 5,000 documents in order to maximize the impact, because he thought it might cause her to lose the election. And by interfering in that way, any supporters he had within the United States government, or certainly an administration or the Attorney General's office, was gone. And then they went hardline on him after that. And I think the result is he ended up spending 14 years in confinement. I think if he had not done that, if he had just dropped the records with this is what we got, it might not have gone that way. So that kind of, it happened too late to help her, but it could have hurt her a little bit. It could have helped her if it had done it sooner. If he had outed Podesta 6 months ahead of the election. Of course, I take that back. A lot of those emails didn't go back that. So yeah, they were going to be pretty close to the election no matter what. And so anyway, that's just another reason why I think that was the plan. And then, to their great credit, they spent, I guess, 10 months, roughly 10 months, assessing the situation, and ultimately made the decision to come forward anyway. And they came forward on October 11th, which was fine. And I noted it. I knew it was a big deal. I knew it was a big, big deal. I happened to be out of the country at the time, and it took me months to get back. And by then, the train had left the station, and I was standing on the platform. But the fact that they came out in 11 was important. But what they did next confirmed how serious they were. And that, of course, is that they facilitated the New York Times articles and got that into the New York Times in order to get the ball rolling. And those New York Times articles really is what triggered. That's when we really crossed the Rubicon with those New York Times articles. But the boat that got us there was the To the Stars Academy of Arts and Sciences, TTSSA, or AAS. And so that's my take on that.
What was Podesta's role in the To the Stars Academy? Was he affiliated with it, you think, officially or unofficially?
As far as I know, no. Once he was outed in the emails, he was not involved in the To the Stars Academies. He came forward. I'm not aware that he did much of anything after that. I mean, the Clinton situation was a tragedy. His top people, the people that have been he's associated with all these years, just lost one of the great opportunities in history. First woman president, disclosure president, the vindication of her husband, all that gone. And so in 2000, you don't see him doing too much. I mean, he was involved. I mean, up until then, I mean, he was brought in as an advisor by Obama out of nowhere. You know, they really didn't even have good reason to do it. And I'm almost positive that he was brought in as an advisor to be able to speak privately and not have the documents available for a long, long time with Obama about what was coming. Hillary's election, her being ending the truth embargo, disclosure president, and all that. So he was going to be involved, but once she loses, all gone. And so he stepped back. They stepped back. They said nothing virtually about this since. Because if they did, they would, I guess, they could very much heat the disclosure process up very fast. And I don't think that Donald Trump being the disclosure president was something that Senator Clinton would have thought to be a good thing to happen. And so they just completely stepped back. Then the question was, would they come forward when Biden won? And when Biden won the election, I thought they might come forward at that point, but they didn't. Podesta, I think, I don't know. No, well, actually, Podesta ended up getting a very important job in the Clinton administration. He kind of went, he went standard, right? And so he got a very important job. I think he's head of the environmental, section of the White House. And so I think John Podesta has done a lot to help advance this issue without question. And I think he probably had enough and decided, look, I'm just going to do some other work. There's other things that need to be done. There's other things I can do. Incredibly talented man. He created the Center for American Progress, which is obviously he left when he took over these jobs. But he doesn't seem to be in the forefront of this. I would like to see them come forward when they feel they can. But they're not involved in the legislation. They're not giving interviews and so forth. I think in a way they did what they could do, and they're passing the baton. But at some point they need to come forward and really help provide the history of the Rockefeller Initiative and what they know about the issue, of course, so that they can get their proper historical due. I mean, they did a lot, particularly John Podesta, to advance the truth embargo, advance disclosure, and they deserve to get credit while they're alive.
So the Clinton years was perhaps the most recently proactive era of a president having some degree of interest in disclosure. And then after
known interest. I mean, we know about it. That's the most recent instance in which we know the president was engaging it formally, and we have records of that. We have a little bit of information about what happened during the Carter administration, but beyond that, that's about it. Now, a lot, I think, was happening under these administrations that is totally not known, which may come out at some point. I believe every president, one way or another, knew that there was an ET presence, one way or another. Meaning it quite a broad spectrum of ways that a president could know this. But I think every one of them knew.
So would the next major milestone perhaps be the first NORAD mission in history, where we have Biden as president, and there was this alleged high-tech Chinese spy balloon that kind of just casually drifted across the mainland?
No, that was a nothing burger. That was an absolute nothing burger. But again, it's notable because the interest and awareness of the ET issue is now so intense and so broad. Anything that happens is immediately interpreted through the extraterrestrial lens. I get it. I understand that. So I'm actually pleased by that. I mean, they were running. I'm constantly seeing articles about some unusual cloud over Ireland or Iran, and it's a pretty unusual cloud, and it gets a UFO article written about it. So a Chinese balloon sprung a leak and dropped down from 80,000 feet to 40,000 feet and got in the airways. That's not supposed to happen. It's really bad for two good reasons. One, a plane could run into it, and two, we prefer that the surveillance of us by other nations not be known. We prefer that our surveillance not be known. But guess what? The major powers are constantly spying on each other all the time. they're hacking and spying, and they got inserted people and this and that, and they got spy balloons going over. They got satellites. They do it all the time, but it's not supposed to be public, right? In other words, I spy, you spy. But when a balloon drops down with a whole bunch of spy equipment on it, it's really a problem. Because one, a plane could run into it, but it's very awkward because what do you do as the president? You don't come out and say, well, a Chinese spy balloon is now flying over North America, and we're not happy about that. But we got plenty of balloons flying over China, so we're just going to let it pass. Go on and let's get back to normal. No, politics doesn't work that way, and so they got a problem. What are they going to do with this damn Chinese spy balloon? And the only choice they had was to shoot it down, right? Make the point. Yeah. Now, China did not help. Naturally, Xi Jinping had to make an announcement, and it was a weather balloon. It wasn't a spy balloon, which irritated, I'm sure, the administration. Which, if it had stepped back for a minute and thought about it, would have remembered the U2 event that happened approaching a summit between Eisenhower and I forget, was it Brezhnev? It might have been Khrushchev. It was Khrushchev. Where one of our U2 planes got shot down. Now, it wasn't because it was flying too low. They wanted to shoot it down. And then we said no. It wasn't us. And we really thought we had gotten away with that. And then we found out that they had shot it down, right? And they had the wreckage. So, I mean, let's face it. This is all a stupid-ass game that costs a lot of money and makes a fool out of everybody. But nevertheless, they had to shoot it down. So they shoot it down. Now, meanwhile, guess what? It is not hard to get a balloon together and send something up there, right? I mean, high school kids can do it. There's a famous guy named I forget, his Armchair Charlie or whatever the hell it is. He attached dozens and dozens of balloons, high-end balloons, to an armchair. Not an armchair. It was one of those pool chairs, right? And he had a BB gun with him to shoot the balloons, and he actually launched himself. He went up to, he's like 15,000 feet, right? Airliners were radioing in. There's a guy in a chaise lounge, with balloons flying, right? This isn't that hard. And so I believe some people got together, some whatever kids, they got their hands on some decent balloons, put something on it, and launched that baby to have some fun. So now, this is how stupid all this stuff is, how the truth embargo makes asses out of everybody. So now there's some other things being reported. Not a Chinese balloon, but just some stuff up there, right? That's floating around. And of course, everybody's all excited. What's going on? And so what are they going to do with that? Right? Are they going to wait for it to land and then find out what idiot launched this thing? Right? What fraternity prank, this is? No.
You got to shoot it down.
They got to shoot it down too. And so they're shooting these things down, probably some fraternity prank with $500,000 sidewinders. And I don't know why they didn't use bullets, but whatever. And so they shot a couple of others down. And then they made a very strong point that there was no wreckage. And people said, well, there you go. Right? It was a saucer and there's no wreckage. Now, right? If you just spent $500,000 shooting down some stupid thing was launched by somebody trying to have some fun, you don't want to show the wreckage. You don't want anybody to ever find it, right? You want to just forget about it and hope it never happens again. That's how stupid this is. But of course, and I don't blame them, people that are into this issue big time and very unhappy with the government feasted on that and have had a good time. But I kind of like my explanation. I don't think that any ET craft were shot down. I don't think they were Chinese weather balloons or more Chinese balloons, because they would have sure as hell said that. But again, you see the impossible position the government was in because of the Cold War, right? The Cold War and the ET issue together makes the public relations and the way governments have to interact with each other just 10 times more difficult than they need to be. And stupid stuff like this happens all the time.
Yeah, these cover-ups definitely complicate things, and then sometimes the cover-up becomes the crime, and or just nonsense. Yeah. Well, this stuff seems to be useful for the UAP disclosure activism, in that I believe it was the first time that the president, although he kind of muttered a bit incoherently, as he tends to do these days as well, but he got in front of a mic and he said something about the incident. And I think that brought more mainstream exposure to the possibility of there being, secrets to eventually share with the public. I don't know how sure you are about the subsequent shootings, Lake Huron and stuff, whether those, what they were. I mean, there's no way to know, right? Because no one's told us.
There's no way to know. But I again, but there was some stuff being tossed around about some kids maybe put up some balloon. I say kids. I mean, to send some stuff up. How could you want to do that, right? You just know you want to do that, right? And so, but again, I get it. I mean, it's good. It's good. It's fun info.
Yeah, it's useful for what you do to at least get it more and more into the mainstream. And you have this amazing collection of all the articles,
Not exactly. Look, it doesn't help us when some reporter goes nuts over a funny-looking cloud in Iran. It doesn't help us when they go crazy over shoot-downs that are probably of no consequence whatsoever. There's a lot of stuff that's getting covered because of the enormous interest in the UFO issue. I get that. A lot of it's silly. And that's not helpful, and yet it's absolutely unavoidable. And so I don't want to get upset about it. I don't want to get upset about it. No big deal. But it's not helping. But it's the way it's going to be until we get end the truth embargo, so we can start getting rational and responsible about this. You're going to have a lot of nonsense. And that's fine. But that's.
Do you think this 2003 incident was, in fact, the first NORAD mission to take place?
What do you mean by NORAD mission?
Well, that's how it was described when it came out initially. And I have an article here. Maybe I can find.
Well, I mean, NORAD tracks these things. So yeah, NORAD tracks them. And if NORAD tracked the weather balloon, then we're going to send a plane up to shoot it. That doesn't make it a NORAD mission. It just means that.
Well, it was described as maybe this is wrong, but as the first NORAD mission shooting down something on the mainland of the United States. Sounds pretty dramatic, yeah.
Well, it's the first shoot down of something over North America, in which NORAD saw something. Yeah. Does that mean they haven't shot down other things that NORAD has found? Absolutely. It's the first one. It's the first time that we actually have a public record of it. That doesn't mean it's the first time.
Right.
It could be. But I can assure you, if we decided to shoot down a saucer that NORAD was tracking, nobody is going to be told about it. Period. But it may not have happened because you shoot down a saucer, the damn thing's going to crash. And so I'll be honest with you. It might have been the first time that has happened because shooting down anything like that over North America, over the United States, would be incredibly risky for the truth embargo. So as far as I know, I don't think the Air Force has ever shot down any plane over American territory that has been publicized. But that would be an interesting thing. Some of your viewers should look into that. Get back to me if you find something. At this point, I don't think they have, but at least that we know about. But if there is an incident where we've shot something down, it would be kind of cool to know that.
Yeah. So those listening, please, if you have any information on that, please do share. Homework. Yeah. So, one of the theories as to the motivations behind the truth embargo is to, is primarily to protect the proprietary technology, to give us an advantage to potentially survive World War III, which we're not very, I'm not personally.
Well, that is probably their thinking, but it's cockamamie. It's just stupid, right? It really is stupid. And it's so stupid that I'm more likely to think, look, it's super special secret stuff. And everybody likes to be involved in super special secret stuff, and it gets disclosed. It's no longer super special secret. Secondly, a lot of money is going to support the truth embargo and the research on this stuff. And there'll still be plenty of money spent in a post-disclosure era, but maybe not with the same people that have it now, whatever. So I think there's a money factor that's non-trivial. But until we get disclosure and people start coming forward, we don't really know the full reasons, but history will want to know. And I look forward to helping get that information out to the extent I can. And I've got plenty of colleagues with more power than I have that will be trying to get that information out. And I think we'll get that information.
Well, we've made it through the highlights of the truth embargo history to pretty much the present tense. So I'm excited to get to the work you're doing, in the Capitol now. We have, the whistleblowers. We have, there's before that, we have the NAPDA, which was a historic accomplishment. It wasn't exactly what we were hoping for, but it was still evidence that this is something that is being taken seriously. I feel like the writing of that quite beautiful legislation alone does validate the existence of these programs and this reality of suppressed information. So yeah, can you give us a breakdown of the modern age with Grush and all that stuff?
Well, here's where we are now. It's remarkable that when we finally get to the finish line, we're practically there, that the extraordinary things we're dealing with right now are taking place. It's just bad luck. It is the nature of things, though, that history doesn't exist in a vacuum, and there's always things happening, and sometimes they're huge, and therefore other things are delayed or eliminated or whatever. I mean, it's just tough. And right now, as it turns out, we are virtually right up to the point where it was clear and obvious what needed to be done to end the truth embargo virtually in a week, 2 or 3 weeks. And at the time that is approaching, the United States just happens to be involved with the most bizarre political situation in the history of the country, 250 years. There's been some unusual periods politically in this country over 250 years, but I'll tell you, none of them compare to this. Not the McCarthy era, not the Civil War, not guys caning each other in the Congress. This is in a whole nother place. It is the results of decades and decades of bad policy, dysfunction, corruption, and so forth, that finally, it's like a pimple finally popped. And it is just off the charts in terms of its complications, its concerns, its implications. And so it just put a stop. I mean, this process is moving forward, and suddenly it's kind of ground to a halt. And it's extremely frustrating because things could get even worse, in which case the truth embargo could end up surviving this. It's hard for me to imagine, but it could happen. So here is the circumstances as of right now. Right now, there are more than enough witnesses to end the truth embargo, and the Intelligence Committee has wanted to have a hearing in front of with these witnesses for a while. We know this. The chairman of the Intelligence Committee has wanted to have a hearing, which of course we want, and we said had to happen and so forth, and said that almost certainly that was the case, and it's the case. But we've learned that the circumstances are so politically radioactive, or at least, what's the word I'm looking for? Volatile, that the decision is gotten too risk averse. My understanding is that Senator Warner, a good man, doesn't want to hold a hearing unless he can get the first-hand people in. He actually wants people that have worked on the ET craft or other, and crash retrievals, whatever, first-hand people testifying, not secondhand people, no matter how qualified they are, no matter how appropriate it was for them to know this information or get this information. In other words, it's risk averse. But the fact is, there's plenty of witnesses that could blow the truth embargo sky high, and some of them are firsthand. I mean, the nuclear weapons tampering witnesses were there when the damn thing turned the missiles off. That's pretty firsthand. And if they wanted to, they could probably get some of the security guys that were up top that actually saw the craft, as opposed to the missile commanders that were down in the silo. But so there's enough to do it, but it's an excuse to not do it if you can't get the firsthand witnesses. And guess what? It is the case, I am told, that because that last legislation was pretty much gutted, so that it was reduced to a shadow of what it could have been, that the firsthand witnesses don't feel that there's enough witness protection yet. And I'm sure that pushback scared them a little bit, meaning, wow, they were willing to gut that bill in the open like that. Everybody knows what they're doing. What would they do to us? And so the firsthand witnesses are too afraid to testify, and Senator Warner needs them in order to do it in the first place. And that's delayed it. And now where are we? So where we are now, hang on, can you see me? Because my droid on the camera is gone funky.
Yeah, you buffered for a
second.
Here
I am. Okay, no problem. Yeah, so where we are now, it's delayed it to the point where we've had a new development. As if things could have gotten worse. Now we have a serious situation where the current president is faced with the prospect of having to turn down the nomination, in which case we have to have another candidate, possibly a primary or whatever. And so, as bizarre as the political situation was, it has gotten even more bizarre. It is in a place by itself. Historians will be writing about this election for hundreds and hundreds of years. I mean, it is off the chart. It makes the Al Gore Bush thing look like nothing. Child's play. This is an absolute mess. And the implications, I mean, the Gore Bush thing was like a close election that got kind of nasty and contested. This is an election that's a complete mess. Nobody knows what's going on. And there's existential issues involved. Serious, serious issues. And so that's where we are now.
The end of history. We made it to the end.
Yeah. What was the name of that book? The End of History by, I forget the name. I happen to believe and still believe that ending the truth embargo is the right thing to do. That what is needed now is to just end that truth embargo, get it done. And so the decisions that are going to be made by the president, well, at least the truth embargo will be over. All right. It will be resolved. It'll happen to be resolved under a Democratic president. So what? And then things might get settled down a little bit. But in other words, whatever the Democrats or the Republicans have in store for the United States of America, they will continue their planning and execution of those policies in a world where the entire world knows that we're not alone in the universe. And I happen to think that is going to mitigate any, how would you say, untold overreach. I'm just saying it'll make things better, not worse. But the people that have the power to end it, even if they thought it would make things better, they're afraid to take the chance because everything is hanging in the balance. And so anything that's that significant happening that's not directly going to help their candidate win the election, they can't do it. So they want to roll.
Well, if Biden's listening, it's not going well for you. Maybe you give us disclosure just to distract people from your sort of melting brain.
I don't want to put it that way because that's crassly political. I'm simply saying that the means to end the truth embargo are there. It is a nonpartisan process. It's been nonpartisan for some time. The Senate Intel Committee will hold the hearing. It's made up of 9 Democrats and 8 Republicans. And one of the former Republican chairs initiated the initial legislation. It is a nonpartisan act, which could have the effect of making the election less hyper-partisan than it is. But I'll be honest with you. What is going down now is off the charts of understanding by someone like me. And I'll tell you, I'm listening to the commentators. I'm listening to some of the former, advisors to presidents and stuff. And when you listen to them, you realize they don't know what the hell is going to happen here. And they don't really know what to do about it. And they're also kind of panicked. Right? They're not they seem to be shaken up.
Yeah, if you're not shaken up, you're not paying attention. Yeah.
Yeah, you're not paying attention. And so I'll say this, it's interesting times. As the Chinese said, when you're in interesting times, you may be scared to death and you may be afraid you're going to die tomorrow, but you're never bored. Yeah, and so I'm not bored. That's for damn sure. Nobody in this town is bored right now. So the truth embargo right now is at the mercy of this extremely bizarre, extremely unprecedented political developments happening in the United States. Right. And that's irritating because the truth embargo isn't just for the United States. Whoever ends it, and it could be another head of state, the truth embargo ends for everybody. And the post-disclosure world is for everybody. This isn't just about, the truth embargo will make the United States cooler. No, the truth embargo is going to change the entire world.
Yeah.
And so if I'm Senator Warner and I have a chance to end that, I have a responsibility to the entire planet to get this truth to them, regardless of what I think it may or may not do the election of a single president of one of 200 countries. Now, I would probably say that to him if I had the chance, and I don't anticipate having a chance. I would say that to him in a much more diplomatic way.
I think we need to talk to all these people. If they're listening, we'd love to have you on the program.
Yeah, maybe
there's a lot going on, Yeah.
Anyway, that is the current state of affairs right now, Ross. And I will happy to answer a couple more community questions, but then I got to go.
Yeah. Well, it's always so great talking with you. Let's scan through some of the options here. We have, let me try to find some that are in your wheelhouse. Okay, well, this one isn't, but let's see what you have to say anyway. Have you heard of pyramids in Alaska or Antarctica? What do you know about them? I'm really interested in the Alaska one, especially.
Again, my thingy is going weird here. I may be frozen, but can you hear me at least?
Yes, I hear you.
Yeah,
okay.
But, yeah. Video may be gone, but look, I've heard about pyramids in Alaska and Antarctica. Antarctica is the ones that intrigued me. It wouldn't surprise me if there was one there. And so it's an interesting issue. It's not a disclosure issue for me, really, but it's just one of those fascinating areas that'd be kind of cool if we learn more about that. So that's about all I can say on that.
Sure. In case you have a bit more on Antarctica, do you know anything about this alleged technology going on at the South Pole with these neutrino arrays with ice cubes and things of that nature? Kind of.
I know there are deep neutrino research going on deep underground. It wouldn't surprise. And I think one is in the Antarctica. I think I've actually read about that. So no big deal.
Cool. We got a lot of other questions here. Okay, we got something about Clinton's. We know that there are no strangers to accusations, blah, blah, blah. John Bassett was abducting children, potentially. Okay, I don't know about that, but maybe that's true. Okay, hold on. We were going to find one from... Okay, Fletcher has a question. How much do you think calling our congressman and advocating for disclosure helps move the needle?
Oh, it's been fantastic. You know, the House jumped in with the Republicans in the House jumped in with Burchett, Luna, Paulina Luna, Nancy Mace, Robert Garcia, Gallego. And of course, we've got 4 tranches of legislation that were basically sponsored by the Senate Intel Committee. This is unprecedented and pretty much irreversible. I mean, this kind of stuff is totally irreversible, though there's plenty more that is too. And so the truth embargo is over. I mean, the truth embargo is basically done. It just hasn't been put away. And the truth embargo managers have lost. They just don't know it yet. So, yeah, it's huge. I mean, it was absolutely necessary. You had to have this happen. If the president was going to come forward, there had to be these things happening over the last 4 years. And the legislation, it could have been quicker, but legislation, the setting up of organizations and reports and this and that, and ultimately the hearings, in order for the president to come forward and do it the right way. That's what this has all been about. It has nothing to do with finding out about the ET stuff. They already know. It's about preparing for disclosure, but they couldn't tell us. They couldn't tell us, yeah, we're doing all this so we can get ready for disclosure, because, of course, that would kind of be disclosure. And so they've had to kind of finesse it, basically lie about their intentions. But it's as lies go, it's a good one because it ultimately leads to the ultimate truth, where then they can get out of the lying business if they've got any sense at all, and start getting truthful American people, and then things will start getting better very quickly.
So, and this question, just to clarify, I think was asking, what good does it do, if any, for us as, what can we do as citizens to help with the activism, like, reaching out to Congress people, for example? Do you think that helps incentivize them?
Yeah, go to New Paradigm Institute, the new think tank, 501c3 think tank, but Danny Sheehan is chairing is making great strides. It's raised quite a bit of money. It'll raise more. They have a way for you to contact your member of Congress, all three of your members, very easily through a form. Boom, bang, boom. If you go to Paradigm Research Group and click on Shiftstorm, it shows you how you can send lots of anybody on Twitter can send tag Twitter messages to three key people: Schumer, Rubio, and Warner, asking for the hearing, requesting the hearing. So you can do that. Just off the top, that's pretty good. And obviously, be active on social media. Post your intentions and desires about this. You can send tag tweets to lots of journalists. Most of the journalists have Twitter accounts. They don't have messaging, but they have Twitter accounts, and a tag tweet ends up in their notification box. So these are the things you can do right now that will help, right? And you can call your representatives and your senator directly. Yeah, generally they will take a constituent call. At least somebody high up will, and let them know we want the hearing. Let's get this done.
So, the presidential election, it's a bit of a strange situation having these elder people.
You think?
Yeah, it's a little unsettling, right? But these two guys seem a lot less interested in this topic than some of their predecessors. Even, Obama was a little bit more quippy about it. Obviously, we discussed the Clintons and their ambitions to kind of get to the bottom of things, at least initially. And what are your thoughts as to why these elder statesmen are so not tuned in or not feeling inspired to at all talk about this topic currently?
We don't know what they think about this issue. We don't know what they know about this issue.
Right.
But clearly, they're not wanting to engage this issue. Okay, fine. Clinton tried, didn't go well. Gore didn't. Obama didn't. Right. And Bush and
well, about Obama though, I mean, he spoke more openly and more intelligently about the topic, even though he was evasive, of course.
Yeah, but I mean, he did. I mean, I understand, but the Clintons didn't. And so, but overall, it is very awkward for the president to take a lead on this. It's the most profound event in human history, and any president that unilaterally tried to drive this, it would be viewed as a huge political action, and also risky. So something of this magnitude needs a certain preparation. It needs certain things to happen ahead of time to make it appropriate for the president to come forward. And that's what we've been trying to get. And we got that. We've got it. We've had it. We've got it. We've got everything we need. Well, the Schumer legislation was the last thing.
Yeah.
And so that's what was left, was at least the basics. It doesn't have the powers, but they could be reinserted any time. So basically we're there. We just need the hearing. And that had to happen. And until it happens, Biden is not going to jump into it. I mean, his hands are full right now. That's for sure. He's got much bigger problems than, well, again, obviously, if we hold a hearing on this subject and it blows the truth embargo up, which it will, it sets the stage for President Biden to come forward and appropriately confirm the extraterrestrial presence based on the testimony that he has seen. And I can say one thing: that really will not change the problem he faces with his own party and his own funders. And so he might very well still have to step down from the nomination, but he will go out with a bang. One hell of a legacy. In other words, if I was an advisor to President Biden or to Warner, I would say, do the right thing.
Yeah.
Let President Biden disclose appropriately. Not so he can win the election, frankly, because it may not matter, but because it'll give him a much better basis to step down. In other words, he will have done about as much as any person could ever expect from a president, and he goes out on a high note, to say the least, to understate it. And so now he could step down with a little glory. Again, this to me is pretty straightforward.
Yeah, he doesn't have a lot to look forward to in terms of the end of his tenure. So why not make history, you know? Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, this is common sense. But the chess games that these people up on the Hill have to play when it costs $8 or $10 or $15 million to win a damn election, and you get primaried at any time, right? And the whole system is just totally stupid. Being a member of Congress is hell. I mean, I think, frankly, it was a hellacious job. A few managed to settle in and kind of do it, but most of them, it's awful. The political system we have, including the electoral system, is completely awful, needs to be reformed top to bottom, and nobody will do it. And so they're willing to go through hell forever for whatever reason, because they're too haven't got the guts to change it, or think they change it, they'll be the loser. What can I say? But it's common sense. The witnesses are ready to testify. They will blow the truth embargo up. The president will come forward then and confirm it without looking intensely political. Not political at all. And it doesn't matter what the president knows. Maybe the president's known about the ET president for 30 years. It doesn't matter. He's coming forward as the head of state, and in an appropriate way, following an incredible hearing that has confirmed to the world what most of the world already knows already. And so the truth embargo was over. We enter the post-disclosure world when a lot of things can change and a lot of good things can happen. And then the president really can step down after done something quite extraordinary and not feel like he's left anything on the table. And then a couple of other candidates will fight it out for the election. That is common sense. But I'll tell you, I'm 77. I have been watching my government for 50 some years. When I went to college, I started paying attention. And the amount of common sense that is being exercised in this city is practically unmeasurable. I mean, there may be some, but it's not a critical mass. In other words, the amount of common sense needed, they're not even getting close to it. And so they're just screwing things up year after decade and creating an awful, awful mess. And it's not we're the only country doing this. Other countries that are doing also stupid things. But as the leading economic power and military power, when we screw up, it has much more impact to the world. And so others are to blame too. I mean, there's other people involved, but other nations involved, but the U.S. has gone out of its way to make things worse. It's just a shame. And this is another example. It is so obvious what has to happen next. And Mark Warner has the power to do it. Nobody else can have that hearing but him. They can hold a hearing over in the House, and they want to, but it won't do the job. It has to be the intel, and he's the chair, and that's his job, and therefore he has to call this hearing. God, I wish I could say that to him in person. Or even
you can go hunt him down. You're the man, Stephen Bassett. You got this. We know you're going to.
No, it doesn't work that way, Ross. You just don't go up there and make an ass of yourself.
Well, you wouldn't. You wouldn't. We should get you meetings with all the people. You're going to save us.
You march into the office and then go past the front, go back into the office and say, "I'm going to talk to Mark Warner." No, I've disgraced the activist movement at that point.
Well, yeah, no, you'd have to set it up the right way.
It's a huge ego deal. Yeah. No, you just keep trying and talking and hope that you can get the opportunity to talk to somebody like that. Sure. I have other colleagues that I think do have access to him, but they're not quite on the same message I'm at. That's fine. I mean, they should be on the message they want to be on. But whatever. I have said this now on probably 50 to 70, 100 podcasts. So, and just in the last year or so. So it's not like I haven't put it out there. Right. Unfortunately for me, the big shots on the Hill don't spend a lot of time on Twitter or YouTube. So they unless one of their aides, particularly one of their millennial aides, happens to see something and take it to them, they're not going to run across it on their own.
So if people were to tag Mark Warner, would that be the most useful person? And also related to that, does it seem realistic, the criteria he's established, where he needs to have only whistleblower type people who have direct firsthand experience? Because is he just saying that maybe as an out? So it seems like he's trying to accomplish something, whereas he potentially knows that the threshold is impossible to reach. And so therefore he doesn't have to do anything, but it can still seem like he's trying.
Again, if you don't want to do something, set up criteria that are impossible. I mean,
yeah,
simple. And by the way, for every whistleblower, there's 20 witnesses. Okay. Maybe more. There are very few whistleblowers. There are lots of witnesses. This is a very important distinction.
Right.
So again, you could, actually, I didn't say this, but you could tag tweet the link to this. There's going to be a link to this interview at some point. You could tag tweet the link to this interview to him, to Warner, right? And just, because his staff will see it. Maybe one of them will watch the interview and go, maybe I should show John this, Mark this. Rather.
Stephen Bassett right here. He's a national treasure. You should take advantage of this opportunity, Mark Warner. You'll learn things.
If you want, I've given about 40 podcasts, and tag them all 40. No, but that it could be that simple. Literally, I mean, that's the way it is now. Somebody tags an office of a senator. It goes into the notification box. One of the staff is checking that, and they see it. Maybe they look at the video. They look at it a little bit and go, this is interesting. And then it ends up in front of that's the way it can work that way. And it happens that way all the time, I assure you. There are a lot of things that are happening because people are seeing things on social media. But it's not built into the infrastructure. It's not like, here's where you go. You just put it out there and hope they see it. One thing I haven't done, that's something I could do, actually. I just realized this. I should be going up on the hill and leaving my card, but having the link to one of my podcasts on the back of the card, and let the person know, look, check this out. If you think it's worth showing to your legislative aide or your chief of staff, do it. Jesus, Ross, why didn't I think of this sooner?
We're going to save the Republic. We got this, buddy. Yeah.
God, sometimes I impress myself with how often I miss the boat. I'm not a genius, but I should have been doing that. I should have been doing that all along. Damn. Why didn't I?
Well, also with the documentary efforts, we're going to hopefully get those rolling, and we're going to hopefully get these senators and friends interested, and that could be a good networking opportunity. And while we're getting them on camera, everyone likes to be on camera. We can also see if they can do their job better by you can give them ideas about what to advocate for. And
I convert the link to a bit.ly link, right? Short link. So it's just a real short thing on the back of the card, right? This is great. Because of this interview, I got to the place where that thought got into this cement brain of mine, and I'm going to do it.
It's the last gasp of our republic. We got to get creative. Let's go crazy. Absolutely. I'm drinking energy drinks. We're going to do this, buddy. We got this.
So that's a good. All right, let me do a couple of promos here. Okay. On September 6th to 13, I'm going to be part of a cruise, a disclosure cruise seminar. contactedsea.com. It's going to be about 25 speakers, including Danny Sheehan and Paul Hynek and Grant Cameron and others, Richard Doty. It's going to be a lot of speakers on this subject, as well as other things, right? Contacted Sea. It's September 6th, 13th. It leaves out of Seattle. It goes to Alaska and back. If you'd like to join us, please let them know I referred you. But I want to mention that recently I was able to convince the organizer of this cruise seminar to add more material or more stuff, more presentations regarding the political processes underway. And they were fine with that. And so what's been added is a long panel, Q&A panel with me, Paul Hynek, Danny Sheehan, and Grant Cameron. That'll be a full panel. And then there's going to be a shorter dialogue. We'll call it like a disclosure dialogue between me and Danny and then between me and Grant Cameron, and me and Paul Hynek. And each dialogue will approach a different aspect of it. With Hynek, we're going to get into Hollywood stuff. And so there's 4, and there's always going to be Q&A. So there's been 4 presentations, I guess, panels and dialogues, not lectures per se, that have been added free as part of the free content on this cruise, September 6th, 13th, out of Seattle. So I want to mention that. Paradigm Research Group is now a nonprofit, and I will have my 501c3 status pretty soon. And I will convert over to a think tank, change the website, and be able to accept donations tax deductible. And this money will not be so much about activism. It will be about, well, it will be, but it'll be about post-disclosure activism. In other words, I'm trying to get Paradigm Research Group funded so it can be a player in the post-disclosure world. I'm looking ahead. Same thing with New Paradigm Institute. Is basically going to be a post-disclosure think tank. That's what it is. Soul Foundation, set up by Gary Nolan, is going to be a post-disclosure scientific think tank. And then there's a political group called UFO Disclosure. What is it? UAP Disclosure Fund. I think Nolan's involved in that. That's actually raising money, which I think will also have potentially post-disclosure impact, but also obviously to be politically funded and active in the post-disclosure world, where the politics will continue, I assure you. And there's other groups forming faster than I can keep up with them. And that's notable. We're going to be launching we're going to be putting up the information for the next contact in the desert pretty soon, probably mid-August, around there, of the dates. It could be bigger than ever next year.
Oh, yeah.
And we did have a pretty good conference this last June, but I think next June could be bigger still. So that's in the works. And see the promos. I think that's about it for. The Hollywood Disclosure Alliance. The Hollywood Disclosure Alliance, which Ross, you're a member of, is continuing to grow. It's still new. It's still a startup. It's about 140 members. Founding members are Hollywood founding members and the UAP founding members. It's a networking. It's a nonprofit networking entity that doesn't make money, but it helps other people make deals. It helps other people create content. Any kind of content that's relevant to this subject that's not fiction. I'm not saying they can't make fiction. They can make fiction, but the kind of fiction I would be interested in would be what we call a narrative fiction, where you have characters playing people in the past, like the Project Blue Book, which was basically a narrative.
True stories, basically. True, well-researched stories, connecting the researchers with those who want to earnestly make the movies for the right reasons.
Because the truth embargo has kept these two groups apart. The high-end production people and the high-end production money and that kind of stuff just was engaging the people in the field, like myself and Dolan and others, and so many others over the decades, because the truth embargo kept them apart. It's like, yeah, it's tainted, right? You can't go there. Now the stigma's gone. And so the Hollywood Disclosure Alliance is designed to facilitate everybody finding out who each other is and getting together and cutting deals. We don't do deals. We don't get part of deals. Right. We just help facilitate networking so people can make content. It is a nonprofit. It has a Hollywood Disclosure Alliance has a GoFundMe page, and we are starting getting donations. We still haven't gotten that Kickstarter amount. We're looking for somebody that who goes to the Hollywood Disclosure Foundation.org website and reads the mission statement and feels like it is righteous, and it is. It is. And decides, hey, we want to help you get going, really get going, because once you get rolling, it's like we're not quite there. And so hopefully a Kickstarter funder will turn up with a $30 or $40 or $50,000 tax deductible contribution. They could do it through the website. They can do it through GoFundMe, and then we can really start doing stuff. We're still limited now because Dan Harari, the co-funder, and I basically launched this thing with our own money, and neither one of us are rich, I can tell you that. So that's happening, and check it out, HollywoodDisclosureAlliance.org. If someone wants to be a member, they need to contact the executive committee, particularly me or Dan, but also any member of the executive committee, and they'll take your information, and maybe you could become a founding member. There was no cost initially, but now that we are trying to get going, we are asking that any new founding member, there's a dues of $150 a year. But if you join, if we bring you in now, you wouldn't still have to go there until September 1. That's a deadline. But we are going to try to put it on dues. Now, if we get a major funder, we'll probably cancel that. But we've got to get some money in, so we are charging $150 for each founding member per year until such time as we're funded in a greater sense. And that's the last thing. That's my promos for today.
Good things. And you have a new plan for networking, and it's okay. Well, I don't want to be too greedy with your time. You know, I love talking with you for long hours. And so perhaps we'll follow up later about some of the collaborative things we're doing. But thank you for being on the new podcast. This is called DIY Disclosure. I mean, you are, you know, the first to advocate on behalf of the people for disclosure, and you did it yourself. And you're a one-man army of truth. And so I couldn't think of a more appropriate person to have here. And I'm grateful to see you and to talk with you now. And yeah, just, you know, it's been a real unique pleasure getting to know you. And I'm so grateful to know you. I mean, not to be a broken record.
I can say the same with you, Ross. You're a great man. You're brilliant, much smarter than I. And so I'm going to milk your brain. Are you going to loosh me? We're going to do some cool stuff. So thanks for becoming part of this, and thanks for joining the HCA. And good luck with the podcast. There's going to be, you can't have too many podcasts on this issue. And if you stick with it, you'll have a great audience in time, because the interest in the subject is exponentially growing.
As it should. We are going to find the truth. Thank you, sir. And you get some rest. And yeah, we'll talk soon, I hope.
All right.
Okay, I'm going to hit the button. It takes a little while, so we're going to click the button.